The floorboards between our bed and the stove were cold enough that January that I could feel the grain of the wood straight through my stockings, and by 3:30 I had crossed them 4 times since midnight. I knew the walk so well I did not need the lamp. 9 steps, the turn at the wash bench, the little draft that came under the door no matter how we stuffed it. My cap was on its nail by the door where it hung every night, and my hair was down my back, and those were the only hours in the whole of a day that it ever was. I would kneel and open the stove door slow so the hinge would not cry, and feed it, and wait to see the coals take, and close it, and walk back 9 steps to a bed that had gone cool on my side while I was gone. I was 24 that winter. It was my 3rd winter married, and my husband slept warm 3 feet from where I knelt, and he was not a cruel man, and he had never once asked me to do it. Neither had the bishop. Neither had anybody. In our house, the fire was never allowed to go out, and neither, it turned out, was I. I came to that house in November, which is a hard month to start a marriage in, and I came with 2 quilts, a cedar chest, and my mother's cast-iron spider pan that she pressed on me at the door with both hands. Our district was a plain one, plainer than some. The ordnung we kept had nothing at all to say about stoves. It spoke to buggies, and to the width of a hat brim, and to the color of a dress, and it said not one word about who in a house rises in the night, because it did not have to. Some things were carried without being written, the way a saying is carried, and the saying I was handed my first week was this: a good wife's fire never goes out. I do not know who said it to me first. That is the strange part, when I think back on it now. It might have been my mother-in-law, standing at the sink with her sleeves pushed past the elbow. It might have been one of the older women after G-May, the 2 of us scraping plates in somebody's back kitchen while the men moved the benches. It might have been that I simply breathed it in, the way you take in the smell of a house you are living in and stop noticing by spring. Nobody handed it down like a law. It came to me sideways, the way most of what a woman learns comes to her sideways. So I folded it in. That is honestly all it was, at the start. I had already folded in the bread and the wash and the garden and the canning and the reckoning of how much meat we had left in the cellar. Adding the stove to the list did not feel like a burden being set on my back. It felt like one more corner of the housekeeping finding its way into my hands, the same as the rest. I got up at 1, and at 3, and near 5, and I straightened my cap before I came out to the kitchen at 5:30, as though I had slept the whole night through, because that is what a wife did, and I did not have a word for it yet. The cold in an old farmhouse is not one cold. It has a shape, and it sorts a household, and it took me a while to see that the sorting was not an accident of the building. His side of the bed was the near side, the side by the wall where the stove heat came up through the register. The baby's cradle sat in the warm corner, and I would have fought anyone who tried to move it, and I still would. Those 2 were tended. That was right and good. But I slept on the outside, on the draft side, with my feet at the cold end and one thin extra shawl over the quilt that I had knitted myself out of scrap wool, and the reason it was that way was not that anyone had decided it. It was that the one who rises in the night must be able to rise without climbing over anybody. Convenience is all. Convenience laid out like a floor plan. And so my hands went numb in the mornings, and stayed numb until near dinner some days, and I would run them under the pump water to get the feeling back and not say anything about it. My feet were worse. I took to wearing 2 pairs of stockings to bed, and then 3, and my husband once laughed, kindly, and said I was built for a colder country than this one. It was at G-May that I first understood there was a kind of scoring going on. 3 hours on a backless bench in a cold barn cleaned out for the purpose, and after the last hymn, over coffee, the women talked, and the talk in deep winter turned to fires the way the talk in August turns to tomatoes. Whose stove held? Whose went out in that big wind and had to be started fresh in the dark with the kindling gone damp? It was never said unkindly. It was never said as a rebuke. But a woman whose fire had held all winter had a way of setting down her cup afterward, and a woman whose fire had gone out had a way of looking at the floor, and every one of us knew which was which. We were reckoning up sleep and calling it faithfulness. We were wearing our own exhaustion pinned on like a badge and passing it to the young wives to wear next, and not one of us called it what it was. February of my third winter, the cold came down and set and would not lift. 9 days under zero. It was the winter G-May was called off, the only time in my life I have known it, because the bishop would not have families out on the road in that wind, and the bench wagon stayed where it stood, and we read at home instead, and the whole district went quiet in a way I have never heard since. The horses' water froze in the trough. The pail by our door froze solid, not skimmed over but solid clear through, so that when I went to lift it, the whole thing came up like a stone in my hands, and I stood there in the dark holding it, and something in me just gave. That was the night I lost count. I had always known the number before. 3 risings, 4 on a bad night. That night I got up and fed it and lay down, and could not tell you afterward whether I had done it twice or 5 times. And I lay in the dark with my eyes open doing arithmetic instead of sleeping. 3 winters. Call it 120 nights of real cold in each one. Call it 3 risings a night, and 20 minutes gone each time before my body would go loose enough to sleep again. I did the sum twice because I did not believe it the first time. It came to more than 100 nights, more than 100 whole nights of my life, taken an hour at a time in the dark, and given to a stove. Not to my child, not to my husband, not to God, who never once in any sermon I had heard from that bench asked it of me. To a stove, and to a saying nobody could name the author of. And what frightened me was not the number. It was that I could feel what the number had done. I had gotten thin in a way that had nothing to do with my body. I was short with my little one over nothing. I stood at the window some afternoons with a dish towel in my hand and could not have told you what I had come to the window for. If you are listening to this and you know that window and that dish towel and that particular hour of the afternoon, I hope you will stay with me, because the rest of this is the part I did not know yet. And if it would not be too much trouble, subscribe, so these find you, and tell me in the comments what it was in your own house that nobody ever asked you to do, and that you did anyway. For years. I read them. They keep me company. I did not go to my husband with it. I want to be honest about that, because it matters. I went instead to Miriam. Miriam was the oldest widow in our district, near 80 then, 20 years a widow, living in the dotty house behind her son's place with a wood range she had cooked on since before I was born. Her kitchen was known. That is not an exaggeration. If you were sick, or newly married, or newly grieving, somebody would say, "Go sit in Miriam's kitchen a while," and you would go, and it would be the warmest room you had been in all year, and you would not be able to say why. I hitched up the buggy on a Tuesday when the roads were packed hard, and I put the baby in with me under the buggy robe, and it was cold enough that the horse's breath came back at us in a cloud the whole way. I had my speech ready. I had worked on it at the wash line for a week. Because what I meant to ask her, God help me, was how to do it better. That was all. I thought I was going to her the way you go to a woman who has kept a thing longer than you have, to find out the trick of it. I thought there was some way of stacking the wood, some knack she had, that would let me get through a night with fewer risings and less of myself spent. And underneath that, plain as the road under the snow, I expected to be corrected. I expected her to look at me and see a young wife complaining about the ordinary weight of a house, and to tell me kindly to be more faithful, and to pray about my discontent, and I had already decided I would take it without arguing. She met me at the door with her sleeves down and her cap strings loose the way old women wear them. She took the baby out of my arms before she took my coat, and I got about 4 sentences into my prepared speech, standing there in the middle of her floor, still in my shawl, before she held up one hand. "Ach, may kind," she said. "Sit stitch, Anne." She sat me in the chair nearest that range, the good chair, and she put a cup of coffee in my hands with cream already in it, and she pulled her own chair around so she was facing me instead of the stove. And then she did not say anything at all for a while. She just looked at me, at my face, in the light of a window in February, which is a merciless light for a young woman who has not slept. Then she said, "Child, who tends you when you have spent the whole night tending the fire?" I did not have an answer. I opened my mouth to give her one. I think I was going to say something about how it was only a season, or how the baby would be bigger soon, and nothing came out, and I sat in that warm kitchen with a hot cup in my two numb hands and cried in front of a woman I had known my whole life and never once cried in front of. She let me. She did not shush me, and she did not pat me. When I was done, she got up, and she opened her stove door, and she showed me. She showed me how she banked it. Not a little feeding every few hours, the way I had been taught by nobody in particular, a proper bank once, near 10 o'clock. The coals raked forward, the fresh wood set on behind and packed close, the ash drawn up over the top of it, the damper brought down to a whisper. Slow and tight and deliberate, a thing that took her maybe 6 minutes. "That will hold clean till morning," she said. "That has held clean till morning for 20 years. And then she told me the part I have never forgotten. She said she did not learn it as a young wife. She learned it after her husband died, when there was nobody left in the house to rise for and nobody left to notice whether she had. She had gotten up in the night for 30 years of her marriage, every winter, 3, 4 times, and it was only alone, in her 50s, that she found out the fire had never needed it. The stove had never asked. The ordnung had never asked. The bishop, if you had put the question to him at a members' meeting, would have been baffled that anyone was bringing it to him at all. He had a district to shepherd and no opinion whatever on the damper of my stove. God had certainly never asked. It was a habit of the house, one house, then the next, then every house on that road, passed from a tired woman to a younger tired woman as though it were faithfulness, when all it ever was a way of arranging things so that the warmth in a home went to everyone in it, except the one who kept it. I had done 100 nights for a saying, and the saying had no author. It had only ever had daughters. Nothing loud changed. I want to be clear about that, because I know how these things get told. I did not go home and announce anything. I did not put it to my husband, or to my mother-in-law, or to the women at Gmay, and I certainly did not carry it to the bishop, because there was nothing there for a bishop to rule on. I went home, and that night at 10 o'clock I banked our stove the way Miriam had shown me, slow and tight, ash drawn up over the top, damper down to a whisper. Then I got into bed on my cold side and lay there certain I would be up in 2 hours, because my body did not believe it yet, even though my head did. I woke at 5:30. The room was warm. The coals were live and red under the ash and took the fresh wood without so much as a complaint. I stood in front of that stove in the dark with my hand on the door, and I did not know what to do with myself. 3 winters. That was all it had ever needed. 6 minutes and a little knowledge that no one had thought to give me. I slept through the whole of the rest of that February. My hands came back. I put my cap on in the mornings without my fingers shaking at the pins. I was gentler with my little one, and gentler with myself, and I stopped standing at windows. And here is the thing I did not expect. In March, when one more hard freeze came through and the wind got up under the eaves, I felt my husband move in the bed beside me, and he got up. He went out in his stocking feet, and I heard the hinge and the small sound of the door, and he came back and got in and put his cold feet against mine and said nothing about it at all. I never told him. He had never known there was anything to know. But somewhere in those weeks, he had noticed that his wife was sleeping, and some part of him decided that she should go on doing it. I am older now than I was in that kitchen, and I have had young wives in my own kitchen since, in that same February light, saying the same 4 sentences I had rehearsed at the wash line. So let me say to you what Miriam said to me, since some of you are sitting in a warm room, that you are the reason is warm. Our Ordnung is a good gift, and I will not have it spoken against. It tells us the width of a brim and the color of a dress and the hour we gather, and whatever the world thinks of it, it has the plain decency to be said out loud in front of everybody, where a person can hear what is being asked of her and say yes to it. The bishop reads it. The members agree to it. It is known. It was never the Ordnung that took my winters. It was the things nobody put in it, and nobody said out loud, and nobody could be asked about. Your own warmth was never meant to come last in your own house. Tending a home does not mean disappearing inside it. There is a great deal that is asked of us that is right and good and holy, and there is a great deal more that nobody ever actually asked, that we picked up because a tired woman before us was carrying it, and we thought carrying it was what love looked like. Those are not the same thing, and you are allowed to find out which is which. And I will not have bitterness put in my mouth about the men, because it is not what I feel. My husband was a good man. He slept warm because he was taught to sleep warm, the same as I was taught to rise. He never asked what it cost me, and that is the whole of his fault, that he never asked. Most of them were never taught to ask. We were never taught to say. There is no villain in that house, and none in that district either. There is only a way of arranging a home that everybody inherited and nobody chose, and it can be set down. It can be set down quietly, at 10 o'clock at night, by one woman who learned a better way to bank a fire. For 3 winters, I did not have a word for what was being taken from me. I have a word for it now. There is more of this than fits in one telling. The rest of that winter, what the bishop's wife said to me over the dishes at the first G-May after the thaw, what I finally said to my mother-in-law 2 years later, and what became of Miriam's kitchen and that old range after she was gone. I wrote it all down, every bit of it, the way it happened. If you want the whole of the story, it is in the first pinned comment below this video, and you can find it there whenever you like. Until then, bank it once and let it hold, and sleep. Sleep is not idleness. It never was. Thank you for sitting with me.